let's talk about biological diversity. Now, what is biological diversity? Now, when we speak of biological diversity, this refers to the variety of the world's organisms, including their genetic diversity and the assemblages they form. So, in other words, ang ibig lang sabihin nito, lahat ng mga living things sa mundo, all the creatures, both plants and animals, including microorganisms on the face of the earth, that's what we refer to as biological diversity. So you can imagine the immense diversity of insects, no? Ilang milyon o ilang bilyong insekto ang meron dito sa mundo. And you can imagine the immense diversity, iba't ibang klaseng mga bulaklak, mga orchids, or iba't ibang klaseng mga mammals. So that's what we meant by biological diversity. There are so many different creatures here on earth, both plants, animals, and including microorganisms. So you can imagine there are how many different species of jellyfish or even different species of fish in our coral reef. So the immense biological diversity of life on earth is so incredible. Alright, so you can imagine there are how many different kinds of insects. Isang damakmak na insekto ang meron tayo. So yan po ang ating ibig sabihin ng biodiversity. So there are so many different kinds of living things, plants, animals, including microorganisms. You can imagine how many different types of fishes are found in our coral reef. You can imagine sa coral reef na lang, di ba? Dami-daming mga isda, no? And there are so many invertebrates, marine vertebrates sa ating mga coral reef. Alright? Okay, so the next question is, what caused this immense biodiversity? Bakit ang dami-daming klaseng mga living things, no? Plants, animals, and microorganisms? So the answer is natural selection, of course. So natural selection and other processes have led to a staggering diversity of organisms. And biologists have identified and even named about 1.5 million species so far. And dahil ang dami-daming klaseng living things na meron tayo dito, they estimated that 2 to 100 million additional species have yet to be discovered. So that means meron pang mga living things, both plants, animals, and microorganisms na hindi pa nadidiscover. Like in the jungles of the Amazon or even in the depths of our oceans. So ganyan po ang ating biodiversity. Now the next question is, why is it important for us to study biodiversity? Now, the study of biodiversity is so important, especially for us Filipinos. The variety of species found in a nation, like here in the Philippines, and the habitats and ecosystems in which they occur are critical resources. So mga ano yan, mga kayamanan po natin yan, yung mga living things na yan, plants, animals, and even microorganisms. And these critical resources should be utilized and sustained for our development. So sa ikauunlad po ng ating bayan. So these critical resources that should be utilized and sustained for our country's development. Now, the next question that we need to answer is, how do we study biodiversity? So, in studying biodiversity, we need to classify. Alright, so these are some of the essential questions for this lesson that we need to answer before we move on. Alright, so some of the essential questions are the following. What are the goals of biologists who classify living things? Number 2, why do scientists classify organisms? Number 3, how do evolutionary relationships affect the way scientists classify organisms? And lastly, what are the major groups within which all organisms are currently classified? Alright, so how do biologists study such a diversity of living things? So naturally, we classify. Now, what are the reasons why we classify? Why classify anyway? Alright, so just imagine you are in a grocery store and you wanted to buy, let's say Lucky Me instant noodles. So to make your life easier and you can locate your desired or the wanted item immediately, you will have to look at the labelings because all of the items in the grocery store are already classified. So there are labelings like say noodles or dairy products or something like that. So you can just look at the labeling and it will make your life easier because all of the items in a grocery store are already sorted or classified. What more inside the library? So let's say if you want to locate a certain book, like let's say Biology by Campbell. So in the library, all of the books are already classified. Let's say science, general reference, mathematics. So just go to the science section and look for the biology books in the science section because all the books in the library are already classified. Alright, so that's one reason why we need to classify. Classification makes the study of living things convenient. No? Like in a grocery store, once you have looked at the labelings of the grocery items, you can immediately locate the desired item. Or let's say in the library, if you are familiar with the classification system of the library, then you can locate your book much easier. Classification makes the study of living things convenient. Why? Because there is already order of things. Another reason why we need to classify organisms is that classification helps in the identification of any given species. And once you have identified, you can reveal the relationships among various groups of organisms. Classification helps reveal the relationships among various groups of living things. Another reason why we need to classify is that in the classification study, we study a few representatives from each group that will help us to integrate the idea of life as a whole. So we just look for representatives from each group that will make our study of the living things much easier. Alright, also classification provides information about all the organisms, their characteristics, and in which specific geographical regions they occur. So once we have identified the organism, then we can get information about that organism. And classification of living things helps to determine the evolutionary relationships between the different forms of organisms based on their characteristics. So just like in number 3, so classification is important in order to determine evolutionary relationship. Now at this point, let us now define what taxonomy is. So basically, taxonomy is that branch of biology that deals with the classification and the naming of organisms. So take note, there are two areas in taxonomy. We have the classification of the organism and the naming of the organism. And taxonomy is part of a larger discipline of biology known as systematics or biosystematics. So from the word system meaning order, And the goal, the determination of phylogeny is the goal of biosystematics. Phylogeny means the search for its common ancestry. And this is done by the construction of phylogenetic trees, which in a sense represents evolutionary relationships. And this is what we call cladistics. Alright? So classification based on common ancestry is cladistics. And there are evidences from living species like the fossil record and the molecular data can be used to establish common ancestry. Common ancestry can be determined by the use of evidence from living species such as the fossil record, molecular data, even embryological evidence, and even in comparative anatomy, as we have learned before. Phylogeny determines evolutionary history for a certain group of species. Alright, so here is an example of a phylogenetic tree. So at the base of the tree is the common ancestor for all. So you will notice that we all came from this group called Protista, but still Protista, they came from heterotrophic bacteria. And from the protists emerged plants, alright, and animals. So from the protozoans to the echinoderms. Now everybody look at birds. So here we have the birds. If you will notice, birds, if you will look at the branch, birds came from reptiles. Birds are actually glorified reptiles. So if you will look closely at the feet of birds, yung paa ng manok for example, yung paa ng manok has scales, which is of reptilian origin. Or di ba yung paa ng manok may claws, clawed siya. So the presence of claws for birds is a reptilian trait. Even the beak of birds is pretty much reptilian, and even the tail. But what separates the birds from the reptiles would be the feathers. Reptiles are covered with scales, while birds are covered with feathers. So that separated birds from the reptiles. Or if you will look again here at amphibians, amphibians, they came from the fishes. Diba? So take a look at the tadpole, yung butete, diba? So the tadpole breathes underwater using gills, just like a fish. Tadpoles had fins, just like a fish. The eyes of the tadpole, they're fish-like. Alright? But what separated the fishes from the amphibians would be the development of limbs that allowed them to colonize the dry land. So amphibians came from the fishes. Isn't that amazing? Now, another way of determining common ancestry would be the use of the cladogram. So what is a cladogram? A cladogram is a diagram based upon similar traits found in organisms. And cladograms show evolutionary relationships and even common ancestry among groups of organisms. Alright, so everybody kindly take a look at the following organisms or animals. So we have here the lancelet, we have here the lamprey, tuna, salamander, turtle, and the leopard. Alright, so here is an example of a cladogram. Now, the lamprey, the tuna, the salamander, the turtle, and the leopard, they share a common characteristic, which is the presence of the vertebral column. While the lancelet is supported by a notochord, not really a vertebral column. So the lancelet was separated from the rest of the animals. Then the lamprey is separated from the rest because the lamprey has no jaws. The lamprey is a jawless fish. So instead of jaws, the lamprey is equipped with a sucker with several rows of teeth. So the lamprey is a jawless animal as compared to the tuna. The tuna has jaws together with the salamander, the turtle, and the leopard. Now the tuna separated from the rest because the tuna has no 4 walking legs, while the salamander, the turtle, and the leopard, they share this characteristic of having 4 walking legs. Now, the salamander got separated from the turtle and the leopard because of the amniotic egg. The eggs of amphibians are protected with jelly, while the turtle and the leopard's egg, the embryo is surrounded by several membranes. Now, in the case of the turtle, it has an external shell covering. Alright, and the turtle got separated from the leopard because of the presence of hair. Turtle is covered with scales while the leopard is covered with hair. So that is an example of a cladogram. Alright, let's take a look at this cladogram, and this cladogram shows why birds are dinosaurs. So you will notice that the theropods and the birds, they got separated. Why? Because the theropods retain their scaly skin while birds develop feathers. But if you will notice, birds, they belong to this group called Dinosauria. So this cladogram shows really that birds are the direct descendants of the dinosaurs. Then we have your cladogram showing our origins. So humans, chimps, the gorilla, and the orangutan are related, but we are closely related to the chimp. And again, this is based from evidence from molecular biology, from comparative anatomy, and even through embryological evidence that we are really closely related to the chimps. And aside from that, humans, chimpanzees, gorilla, and orangutan, we share the same group. We belong to order Primata, the primates. So what are the characteristics common to these 4? So first, we have the grasping hand with an opposable thumb and the forward-facing eyes for stereoscopic vision. So we share common characteristics with the chimp, the gorilla, and the orangutan. So isn't that fascinating indeed? Now let's take a look at this cladogram showing why birds are the direct descendants of the dinosaurs. So here it shows that the theropods separated from the birds. The theropod dinosaurs retain their scaly skin while the birds develop feathers. And if you look closely at this cladogram, really the birds are direct descendants from this group called Dinosauria. Birds, again, are glorified dinosaurs. Alright, so isn't that fascinating to know? And here is a cladogram showing our origins. So we are more closely related to the chimp, and this is based from molecular data, studies of DNA, the studies using embryos, and even comparative anatomy. Right? Though the gorilla and the orangutan, they are distant cousins, but we are more closely related to the chimp. In fact, we belong to the same group. No? We belong to order Primata, the primates, because we share common characteristics with the chimps, the gorilla, and the orangutan. So what are these characteristics? This one, the grasping hand with an opposable thumb. Alright, and the forward-facing eyes for stereoscopic vision, which is pretty much needed for arboreal living. So when we say arboreal living, that's life in the trees. But as we know, millions of years ago, our ancestors eventually went down to the trees and they started colonizing the plains of Africa. We started walking on 2 legs and we became bipeds. Alright, so let's take a look at this cladogram. So a student researching bears found the chart below in a textbook. The chart below shows the classification of several types of bears. So we have here the spectacled bear. Then we have the Asiatic black bear or Ursus tibetanus. Then we have here the black American bear or Ursus americanus, and we have the brown bear Ursus arctos, or the brown bear. Okay, so which organisms are most closely related? So is it 5 and 6 or is it 6 and 7? So everybody kindly take a look. So which bear are more closely related? Is it 5 and 6 or 6 and 7? Alright, so based from our cladogram, it shows that 6 and 7 are more closely related as compared to 5 and 6. So it shows in the cladogram that the Asiatic black bear and the American black bear are more closely related than the spectacled bear. Alright, so that shows in our cladogram. And in fact, the Asiatic black bear and the American black bear had a common ancestor, which is Ursus minimus, which is already extinct. Okay, alright, so which bear or which organism is the common ancestor for 6, 7, and 8? So like what I mentioned, the common ancestor, if we will look at the cladogram for 6, 7, and 8, is Ursus minimus, which is already extinct. So that's how we look at the cladogram. Alright. Okay, so I hope everything is clear about the cladogram. Alright, so after studying the concept of the cladogram, let us now trace the beginnings of modern taxonomy. Now, did you know that the classification of living things started with Aristotle? Alright, so Aristotle was the first. He was the first to classify animals. So he classified animals based on their habitats, while plants were classified based on their stem structure. And because he was the first to classify living things, both plants and animals, he was given the title as the father of biology. So the classification scheme of Aristotle was this. So he classified animals based on their habitats. So we have air-dwelling animals, we have land-dwelling animals, and water-dwelling animals. While plants were classified based on the structure of the stem. So we have plants with soft stems, we call them herbs. Then we have short plants with woody stems like the santan, so we call them shrubs. And we have plants that are tall, large, with woody stems, so we call them trees. So we have herbs, shrubs, and trees. So that's how Aristotle classified plants based on the structure of the stem. While for animals, we have air dwellers, we have water dwellers, and land dwellers. So this was accepted for some time, but many scientists realized that many plants and animals did not fit into Aristotle's system of classification. Like for example, the frog. So how would you classify the frog? The frog can live both on water. The frog can also live on land. So is the frog a land dweller or a water dweller? Or let's say the duck, yung pato. The duck can live on water and the duck can also fly. It can be an air dweller. So how would you classify such animals? So many animals and plants did not fit into Aristotle's system of classification. So what they did, scientists have devised other classification systems. And these early classification systems gave common names to organisms. So they made use of common names. Alright, like for example, this organism. So we know that this is a jellyfish. They gave the name jellyfish because of its jelly-like body. But there's a problem with the name jellyfish. First of all, the jellyfish is not a fish. Alright, it has a jelly-like body, but it's not a fish. So the name jellyfish is somewhat confusing. Alright, here's another example. So this is a starfish. The name starfish was given because of the shape of the body, which is star-like. But the starfish is not a fish. So the name starfish is somewhat confusing or even misleading because this creature is not a fish, but it has a star-like body. Alright, or for example, this creature, so we call this catfish. It was given the name catfish because of the whiskers, but this organism does not even belong to the cat family. So there's something wrong with the name catfish. Yes, it's a fish, but it is so distantly related to the cat. Alright? Or for example, this is a fish. This is a seahorse. We call this seahorse because of the horse-like shaped body. But this is a fish. It is distantly related to the horse. Alright? So again, the word or the name seahorse is somewhat misleading. Or this one, we call this the sea lion. Alright? But nowadays we call it seal. But again, the name sea lion is somewhat confusing. So what's wrong with using common names to an organism? So number one, common names, as I have mentioned earlier, given to an organism confuse many people, and the common name proved to be misleading. Alright, like yung jellyfish. Diba? It has a jelly-like body, but the jellyfish is not a fish. So using common names confuses many people and prove to be misleading. And common names can give you misleading ideas about the characteristics of an organism and the group in which it should be classified, like jellyfish. Again, the creature is not even a fish. Alright? Wala namang gills yung jellyfish as compared to the rest of the fishes. Alright? It doesn't even breathe through gills. Oxygen is distributed by diffusion. So it gives us misleading ideas about the basic characteristics of an organism and the group in which it should be classified. Alright, then eventually came this guy called Carolus Linnaeus. So Carolus Linnaeus gave us a more accurate system of classification. That's why he was now the father of modern taxonomy. Carolus Linnaeus was given the title as the father of modern taxonomy. Why? Because of his system of classification, which we call as the 7 ranking scheme. So in the 7 ranking scheme of Linnaeus, all living things are classified by rank or hierarchy. So the highest rank is the kingdom. A kingdom is made up of several phyla. A phylum is made up of several classes. A class is made up of several orders. An order is made up of several families. A family is made up of several genera. And a genus is made up of several species. So that was the 7 ranking scheme of Carolus Linnaeus. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Alright, So organisms can be placed in a ranked hierarchy with kingdoms. Then kingdoms are divided into phyla for animals, but for plants, we use the term division. So division and phylum, they are of the same rank. Phylum is used for animals, while the term division is used for plants and fungi. Then a phylum is divided into classes, then in turn into orders. Orders are divided into families. A family is divided into several genera, and a genus is divided into several species. So that's the 7 ranking scheme of Carolus Linnaeus. Alright, so at this point, let us now classify ourselves. So we humans, we belong to kingdom, or what do you think? We belong to kingdom Animalia. So we belong to the animal kingdom. In fact, we are the highest form of animal life. Then we belong to what phylum? We belong to phylum Chordata. So again, because our spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column. Alright? Then we belong to class Mammalia. Why? Because females produces milk through their mammary glands, and we are covered with hair. Alright, then we belong to order Primata. So we share the same characteristics with the chimps, the gorillas, and the orangutan. The forward-facing eyes and the grasping hand with an opposable thumb. Then we belong to family Hominidae. So Hominidae, hominids, meaning we are upright walkers. Then we belong to genus Homo, thinking, and belong to the species Sapiens, modern man. Alright, so that's how we classify ourselves. Okay, so we belong to kingdom Animalia. Now in modern taxonomy, there's another upper hierarchy than kingdom. So we have domain. So we belong to domain Eukarya. So Eukarya means the cells are basically more modern than prokaryotes. So eukaryotes, you have the nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Then we belong to kingdom Animalia. We belong to phylum Chordata, animals with spinal cord protected by the vertebral column. We belong to class Mammalia. We belong to order Primata, the primates. Again, the grasping hand with an opposable thumb and forward-facing eyes. We belong to family Hominidae, hominids, upright walkers. We belong to genus Homo, human, thinking human, and species Sapiens, modern human. Okay, so what about the dog? So this is how we classify the dog. So the dog belongs to kingdom Animalia. So just like us, we belong to the same kingdom. The dog and humans belong to the same kingdom. The dog and humans also belong to the same phylum Chordata. The dog and human belong to the same class, Mammalia. But we separated from the dog because the dog belongs to order Carnivora while we belong to order Primata. So order Carnivora, carnivores. Then the dog belongs to family Canidae, canine, genus Canis, species Familiaris. Alright? Okay, so before we move on, if two species belong to the same order, what other levels in the Linnaean system must they have in common? Alright, so what do you think? If two species belong to the same order, what other levels in the Linnaean system must they have in common? Alright, so we have the following: kingdom, phylum, and class. Alright, then we have order, genus, and species. So the answer is what? Kingdom, phylum, and class. Okay, so these three levels are the levels that they have in common. Alright? Okay. Alright, cats, goldfish, and humans are in the same phylum. Yes, we belong to phylum Chordata. What characteristics do they have in common? So, catfish, goldfish, and humans, we have a spinal cord, and the spinal cord is protected by the vertebral column. Alright? What characteristics place cats and humans in a different order from the goldfish? So, humans, we belong to order Primata. The cats belong to order Carnivora, just like the dog. While the goldfish belongs to class Ostiches, or the bony fishes. Alright. Now, in the realm of Linnaeus gave us a system of classification. Linnaeus also gave us a system of naming living things. And this system of naming is what we call as binomial nomenclature. Bi meaning two, nominal names. So, literally, binomial nomenclature means assigning two names. Carolus Linnaeus developed a naming system called binomial nomenclature. So, in the binomial nomenclature system, each species is assigned a two-part scientific name. Alright, so this is what we call now the scientific name of an organism, binomial nomenclature. Scientific naming, aka binomial nomenclature, is the official system giving names to organisms. Alright? So there. So two-part naming. So there are two names in an organism. Scientific naming is more accurate because scientific naming is standardized. Each creature has only one scientific name, like us, Homo sapiens. And each name refers to only one creature. Wala namang ibang Homo sapiens kundi tayo lang. So scientific naming is standardized. And because of this will allow precision. Scientific naming is of great advantage because it allows precision. While most people might refer to a lot of things as a cat, there are big differences between house cats and let's say lions. Right? Kaya ang lion, iba yung kanyang scientific name, Felis leo. No, compared to the cat. The cat scientific name is Felis domestica. Alright, so magkakaiba yan. There are big differences between the house cat and the lion. Alright, so at this point, let us now state the rules in writing the scientific name. So we have to follow these rules in writing scientific name. Alright, so the binomial nomenclature system is made up of a genus name and the species name. So dalawa yan, no? Genus name and the species name. Like Homo sapiens. Homo is our genus name, sapiens is our species name. Alright, number 2 rule, the scientific name of a species is italicized, or the scientific names of species are italicized, yung nakaslant. Alright, so using the computer, you can do that, pero pag sa exam, di ba, hindi. So, or writing it on a piece of paper. So, I would suggest, kasi mahirap i-slant yung mga letters, no, pag nagsusulat. So, just underline the genus name and underline the species name separately. Underline the genus and underline the species name. Okay, like for example, this one, Homo sapiens, naka-italicize siya. Okay, but you can do this sa exam, sa written exam, Homo sapiens. So, underline the name Homo and underline the name sapiens. So, I will accept that. Alright. Okay, the first part of the name is the genus to which the organism belongs. A genus is a group of closely related species. So take note, the first letter of the genus name is capitalized. Alright, the second part of the name is unique to each species within the genus. This part of the name often describes an important trait where the organism lives. The species name is lowercase. Alright, like for example, this one. The scientific name of the horse, Equus caballus. Letter E is capitalized while the rest are written in lowercase letters. Equus caballus. Kabayo. Doon nakuha yung name na kabayo. Caballus. Or this one, Loxodonta africana. Yun. So, the letter L, the first letter of the genus name is capitalized while the rest are written in lowercase. Ito naka-italicize siya, but you can underline the genus name and the species name. Alright? Then we have here the penguin. The scientific name of the penguin is Megadiptes antipodes. Alright? And this is the cougar or Felis concolor. Ayan, no? So magkakamag-anak to. Felis domestica, house cat. Felis leo, the lion. And Felis concolor, the cougar. Alright. Then here we have the rooster. Okay, chicken, Gallus gallus. O doon kinuha yung Misa de Gallo, di ba? Pag early morning tumitilawak yung mga manok. Kaya nga Misa de Gallo, Gallus gallus. So isn't that fascinating? All right? Or this is the dog. What is the scientific name of the dog? The scientific name of the dog is Canis familiaris. All right? Alright, so imagine you are in a scientific convention and your topic in that convention is this animal. Ito, tong elepante, yung African elephant. Representatives from different nations are present. So, iba't ibang tawag yun sa elepante na yun, yung African elephant. Zoo in Japan, Pigu in Armenia. Alright, so Swahili, Tembo, but yan, parang di kayo magkakaintindihan dyan, no? But kung scientific name, Loxodonta africana, then, di ba magkakaintindihan kayo? Alright? Okay guys, so, and if you will notice, scientific names, these are Latin words, no? Scientific naming uses Latin words. In naming organisms in biology, Latin is used in describing and naming an organism. So, ang tanong, why use Latin rather than some other language? Alright, so number one reason Latin was used because it was the language of the scholars, which made communications possible between individuals whose native language may differ. So, ito yung lengguwahe ng mga scientists noon. Okay? Alright, however, presently few people in the sciences can speak or write Latin. So why do we continue to use Latin? The main reason is that Latin is an unchanging language. This is important since contemporary languages are dynamic like English. Diba? Paiba-iba yung mga terms sa English. Pero Latin, hindi nagbabago yan. Latin was the universal language of science during the time of Linnaeus. Okay, kaya ginamit ni Linnaeus ang Latin. Alright, so here are just some common plants and animals with their scientific name, like the pea plant, Pisum sativum, onion, Alum cepa, mango, Mangifera indica, the wheat plant, Triticum aestivum, soya, Glycine max. So for the animals, frog, Rana pipiens or Rana hexadactyla, the cat, Felis domestica, the dog, Canis familiaris, yung langaw, housefly, Musca domestica, and the common carp, Cyprinus carpio, cobra, Naja. Alright, so there. Now at this point, let us now watch this video about taxonomy.
Hi, I'm Emerald Robinson, and in this What Is video, we're going to discuss taxonomy. Taxonomy is a system that biologists use to group organisms based on similar characteristics. Taxonomy is based on a concept called homology, shared characteristics that have been passed down from a common ancestor. Although humans have been classifying organisms by various methods since ancient times, Swedish biologist Carolus Linnaeus is considered to be the father of modern taxonomy. His most famous work, Systema Naturae, established a system we still use today to determine an organism's scientific name. This system is called binomial nomenclature. To understand what makes up the binomial nomenclature, we need to start at the top. Classic biological taxonomy usually places an organism into one of 5 kingdoms: bacteria, protist, plants, fungi, or animals. Each organism is then classified into the following groups: phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. It is the genus and species that makes up an organism's scientific name. For example, the scientific name for humans is Homo sapiens, where Homo is the genus and sapiens the species. Sometimes scientists classify organisms using a 3-domain system. The 3 currently accepted domains are Archaea, single-celled microorganisms that tend to live in extreme environments like very high heat or salt concentration. Bacteria, which are abundant and live in most habitats on Earth. And eukaryotes, any organism made of cells which contain a membrane-bound nucleus. Although we used to classify organisms based on characteristics that could be seen by the naked eye or under a microscope, today we commonly rely on analyzing an organism's DNA instead. Scientists will continue to use these means to classify the approximately 15,000 new species that are identified each year.
Earth has an amazing variety of living organisms. You could probably name hundreds of them: cows, dogs, grasshoppers, mushrooms, trees, flowers, and bacteria. You may even know the names of several dog breeds. However, do you know the names of other organisms in languages other than English? How do you create names for organisms that can be used anywhere in the world? This is where the taxonomic classification, also called the Linnaean system, comes into play. Named after its inventor, Carl Linnaeus, a Swedish botanist, zoologist, and physician, the Linnaean classification system has 8 levels of classification. You may also hear this called taxonomic rank. You will often see the levels displayed like a triangle. This is because the levels at the top are broad and general, whereas the levels at the bottom are more specific. As you move down levels of taxonomic classification, the organisms will be more similar to one another. The 8 levels of classification are domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Let's take a look at an example of a fox. We will start at the domain level. There are 3 domains in all: Eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. Organisms that fall under the Eukarya domain have cells with nuclei, whereas organisms that fall under prokaryote or archaea have cells that lack a nucleus. Fox cells have nuclei and therefore are eukaryotic organisms. This eliminates the bacteria because a bacteria does not have a nucleus. Next comes kingdom. There are 6 kingdoms: Protista, fungi, plant, animalia or animal, and archaeobacteria and eubacteria. Foxes are animals and thus fall under the animal kingdom. This eliminates the plant because it belongs to the plant kingdom. Next is phylum. There are dozens of phylums. Some examples include arthropods, which are crabs, cnidarians, which are jellyfish, and chordata, which are dogs, bats, and fish. Foxes belong under the phylum Chordata because they have a spinal cord. This eliminates the insect because they have an exoskeleton and no spinal cord. Then comes class. Foxes are classified under Mammalia, meaning they have special glands that can be used to provide milk to their young, along with some other features. This eliminates the frog because a frog is an amphibian and not a mammal. Foxes belong to the order Carnivoria because they have specialized teeth that can be used to eat other vertebrates. This eliminates the cow because they do not have these specialized teeth. Foxes are classified under the Canidae family, which is also nicknamed the dog family. Wolves, dogs, coyotes all belong to this family. This eliminates the polar bear. Next is the genus. Foxes belong to the genus Vulpes, which means fox in Latin. Organisms that belong in this genus are often referred to as true foxes and are identified by the color difference between their tails and the rest of their bodies. This eliminates the dog, which belongs to the genus Canis. And finally, the fox's species label is also called Vulpes. Thus, the scientific name for a fox is Vulpes vulpes, which literally translates to fox, fox. This eliminates the Phoenix fox. To sum it up, the whole classification for a fox would look like this. However, you only have to use an organism's genus and species when creating the scientific name.